He is never going to walk straight up to you and say, "I want to hug you." Most men simply do not communicate that way. They don't make big announcements about what they feel. They rarely sit down and explain every emotion in clear, direct words that leave no room for doubt. But there is something else that has been speaking for him all along. His body has probably been expressing those feelings for much longer than you realize. The surprising part is that you have been there watching it happen with your own eyes. You have shared the same space, the same conversations, the same moments, yet you kept convincing yourself it meant nothing. You wondered if you were imagining it. You told yourself maybe he was naturally friendly. Maybe he behaved like this with everyone. Maybe your own hopes were making you notice things that were never really there. You tried to explain away every little moment, but then it happened again and again. That quiet voice inside you kept returning, gently reminding you that something felt different. It did not feel random. It did not feel like his usual behavior with everyone else. It felt personal. It felt intentional. It felt like his attention kept moving in one direction, toward you. Deep down, you already sensed the truth. What you were missing was not your intuition. You were missing the words to describe what you were seeing. That changes today. Stay with me, because once you understand these 8 signs, you will never again sit alone after meeting him, replaying every second and wondering what it all meant. Instead, you will recognize the answer while it is happening, in the exact moment, without waiting for him to say anything at all. But before we dive into those signs, there is one important piece that almost everyone ignores. Ironically, it is also the key that makes everything else easy to understand. Once this part becomes clear, the confusion disappears and the signals become impossible to miss. Most people never hear this explained, yet it changes the way you see every interaction from that point forward. What comes next may completely change how you interpret his behavior. People often expect emotions to be expressed through words, but many men naturally communicate in a very different way. For many women, talking about feelings creates closeness. Saying, "I missed you," or "I've been thinking about you," feels comforting because it turns private emotions into shared experiences. Speaking those words creates connection. It brings relief. It makes the relationship feel more secure. But many men experience emotions differently, especially when those feelings are still developing and they have not fully figured them out themselves. Saying those emotions out loud can suddenly make everything feel serious. Once spoken, those feelings become real. Real feelings can be rejected. Real feelings can change the relationship forever. They can create awkwardness where everything once felt relaxed and easy. Because of that, many men choose another path. Instead of explaining what they feel, they reveal it through actions. They communicate through the way they position themselves near you. They show it through repeated little behaviors that seem ordinary until you notice the pattern behind them. These small moments often carry much more meaning than people realize. The problem is that most women were never taught to notice these silent signals. They were taught that words are the only reliable proof. They learn to wait until someone clearly says how they feel before believing anything. That belief leaves many women trapped in endless overthinking, searching for answers that have already been quietly displayed in front of them. The truth has often been sitting beside them all along. That is exactly why understanding these signs matters so much. By the time we finish, many memories you have already shared with him may suddenly make perfect sense. Moments that once seemed confusing could become surprisingly clear. So let's begin with the very first sign, because this one appears far more often than people realize. Most people completely overlook it, even though it may be one of the strongest silent clues you will ever notice. The first sign is surprisingly simple. He keeps finding reasons to reduce the space between the two of you. The interesting part is that those reasons often seem perfectly normal until you really pay attention. This is not about him walking over because he urgently needs to tell you something important. It is not about practical situations where standing closer simply makes sense. Instead, it happens in small, almost invisible ways that repeat over time. He chooses the chair beside you even when several others are available available. He steps a little closer while talking, even though he could easily stay where he is. During group conversations, he naturally drifts toward your side without realizing he is doing it. When everyone moves to another room, he somehow ends up near you again. None of these moments look dramatic on their own. In fact, each one is easy to dismiss, but when the same pattern keeps repeating, it stops being an accident. His body is choosing closeness before his mind is ready to explain why. That is an important difference. People are often much more honest through unconscious behavior than through carefully chosen words. If you continue watching these small movements, instead of waiting for a big confession, you may begin noticing a completely different story unfolding right in front of you. Stay with me, because the next sign is even more revealing, and once you recognize it, you may never look at his quiet actions the same way again. This is really about the excuses he creates. The small ones. The ones that sound just believable enough that nobody questions them. He walks over and stands beside you, even though he had plenty of space to remain exactly where he was. During dinner, he quietly slides his chair a little closer, despite already hearing every word you were saying. In a group, he naturally ends up next to you instead of sitting across from you, even when sitting across would have made more sense for the conversation. Somehow, he keeps finding himself in the same part of the room where you are, even though there is no real reason pulling him there except your presence. The important thing to understand is that this usually is not a planned decision. He is not thinking through every movement or telling himself to move closer. That is not how genuine attraction works. When a man feels naturally drawn to someone, his body often reacts before his mind catches up. It is not a carefully designed strategy. It is more like an invisible force gently pulling him toward the person he wants to be near. His actions happen almost automatically. That is why you may notice the distance between you slowly disappearing throughout the evening without either of you mentioning it. He keeps appearing beside you, choosing your side, finding reasons to stay nearby even when several other options are available. Stop convincing yourself it is just random chance. Stop assuming that everyone behaves this way. These repeated moments are often his quiet way of choosing closeness without needing to say a single word. His actions are speaking long before his voice ever does. Most people completely overlook this pattern, but once you see it, it becomes difficult to ignore. Stay with me, because the next sign reveals something even more personal, and many people miss it entirely. The second sign appears through small touches that serve no real purpose. It is important to understand that this is not about dramatic or obvious physical contact. Instead, it shows up in tiny moments that are incredibly easy to brush aside. He lightly touches your arm as he walks past, even though there was enough space to avoid any contact at all. As you move through a doorway together, his hand briefly rests against your back, even though you did not actually need any guidance. He notices a loose thread on your jacket or gently moves a strand of hair away from your face, and somehow his hand remains there just a heartbeat longer than necessary. You both laugh at something funny, and instead of simply smiling, he lightly bumps your shoulder as though the moment naturally invited that extra connection. These little gestures matter more than they first appear. Physical touch is one of the strongest silent forms of communication people have. Most individuals, especially men, do not casually reach out and touch everyone around them without thinking. When someone only sees you as a friend, they usually keep a comfortable amount of personal space. There is no strong desire to create unnecessary physical contact, but when deeper feelings begin growing, the body quietly starts searching for harmless opportunities to shorten that distance. Every gentle touch becomes a safe excuse to experience even a brief moment of closeness. At the same time, he is paying attention to your reaction. He wants to know if you stay relaxed, if you smile, if you remain comfortable, even if he never admits he is watching. If you respond naturally and do not pull away, that silent response gives him confidence. He may not even realize it consciously, but it encourages him to repeat those moments again later. What happens next may surprise you, because the third sign often reveals even more than physical touch ever could. The third sign is found in the way he looks at you. At first, it sounds simple, but the small details make all the difference. In an ordinary conversation between friends or strangers, eye contact naturally comes and goes. People meet each other's eyes for a moment, then look away without thinking. Their attention shifts around the room, toward other people, or to whatever is happening nearby. It feels effortless and completely normal. But when genuine attraction enters the picture, something begins to change. Looking at you becomes enjoyable. Holding your gaze feels comfortable instead of awkward. Without realizing it, he allows those moments to last just a little longer than they normally would. He looks into your eyes, then hesitates before looking away, almost as though part of him wants the moment to continue. Sometimes he catches himself staring for an extra second before smiling or turning his attention elsewhere. Other times, when your eyes meet unexpectedly, neither of you breaks the connection as quickly as usual. Those tiny pauses often reveal emotions that words have not yet expressed. His eyes are lingering because being connected to you, even silently, feels good. That extra second may seem insignificant, but repeated over time, it creates a clear pattern. It shows comfort, curiosity, and a growing emotional pull that is becoming harder for him to hide. Once you begin noticing these longer moments of eye contact together with the other signs, the picture becomes much clearer. And stay with me, because the next sign uncovers another quiet behavior that many people notice but rarely understand correctly. The eye contact lingers. It lasts just one moment longer than a normal conversation usually allows. Only a second, but enough for something between the two of you to quietly change. Enough for the atmosphere to feel different. It moves beyond ordinary conversation into something both of you can sense, even if neither of you says a word about it. Now here is the part that many people never notice. It is not only about how long he holds your gaze, it is also about what happens the instant that connection finally ends. Watch where his eyes go next. Does he quickly glance around the room? Does he look to the side? Or does he lower his eyes? That small detail can reveal far more than most people realize. When someone looks down after sharing a long, meaningful moment of eye contact, it often suggests that the emotional intensity affected them. It is as if they need one quiet second to gather themselves before returning to the conversation. It may seem like a tiny reaction, lasting less than a heartbeat, but it is one of the most natural responses a person can have because it happens without planning. You cannot easily pretend to recover from a feeling that never existed. If you have shared moments where his eyes stayed on yours longer than expected, and then he quietly looked down before speaking again, do not dismiss it as meaningless. That brief pause may have been the clearest sign that something inside him shifted, even if he never found the words to explain it. Stay with me, because the next sign reveals a behavior that happens so naturally, many people never realize it is taking place. The fourth sign is that he begins matching your movements without realizing he is doing it. This is known as a natural response between people who feel connected, and it happens far below conscious awareness. It is not a trick or a technique. It is not something most people can intentionally maintain throughout a genuine conversation. It simply appears when someone feels comfortable and emotionally engaged. You lean forward while talking, and before long he has done the same. You slow the pace of your speech, and gradually his voice begins matching your rhythm. You laugh, and he joins in almost immediately, sometimes before he has even fully understood what made you laugh in the first place. You tilt your head while listening, and later you notice he is sitting in almost the same position without either of you realizing how it happened. Even the overall mood between you starts moving together. When you become more relaxed, he relaxes too. If you grow quieter, something inside him also becomes calmer. This is what happens when two people begin responding to each other at a deeper level than simple politeness. Their bodies quietly fall into the same rhythm. That is why this sign matters so much. You can choose to smile more. You can decide to make stronger eye contact. You can even intentionally stand closer to someone, but naturally copying another person's posture, timing, energy, and subtle movements over an entire evening is not something people people usually control. It happens on its own. So if you have noticed that his body keeps following your lead, that his pace adjusts to yours, and that his overall energy seems to rise and fall alongside yours, do not dismiss it. His entire system may be responding to you without him even realizing it. What happens next may surprise you because the next sign often speaks louder than any compliment ever could. The fifth sign appears when he keeps finding reasons to stay longer than he originally planned. This behavior is much more meaningful than it first seems because most people simply assume he lost track of time. He tells you he can only stay for an hour, yet somehow 2 hours later he is still sitting there, completely absorbed in the conversation. He already put on his jacket, his keys are in his hand, it looks like he is about to leave. Then, almost without thinking, he sits back down because another topic comes to mind. Every time the conversation reaches a natural ending, he quietly creates a new beginning. He asks another question. He remembers another story. He brings up one more idea that keeps the evening going just a little longer. This usually is not because he has nowhere else to be. It happens because leaving means creating distance again, and part of him is not ready for that yet. Being close to you simply feels good, even if he cannot fully explain why. So instead of admitting that he wants more time with you, he finds ordinary reasons that sound perfectly reasonable on the surface. If this happens consistently, if your conversations almost always last much longer than expected, then it is probably not poor planning. It is often a quiet choice. Without saying it directly, he is deciding that spending extra time with you matters more than whatever else was waiting for him. The sixth sign is even quieter, but once you recognize it, you will start noticing it almost everywhere. His body naturally keeps turning towards you, even when the situation gives him no reason to do so. In a group conversation, people may look in one direction while their bodies point somewhere completely different. Eyes can be polite, words can be shared with everyone, but the body usually reveals where attention truly lives. When someone feels genuinely drawn to you, their feet begin pointing towards you, their shoulders gradually face your direction, their chest naturally opens toward where their interest is focused, even while they continue talking to someone else. If you notice that his body keeps orienting toward you during conversations, that his feet remain pointed in your direction while sitting beside you, or that he repeatedly angles himself toward you even when the room's layout gives him no reason to, do not assume it is random. Those quiet movements often reveal exactly where his attention and interest naturally keep returning. Stay with me, because the next sign may be the easiest to overlook, yet it often confirms everything the earlier signs have already been quietly telling you. His attention is already moving in your direction, even when he is talking to someone else, even when his words seem focused somewhere completely different. His body often tells a different story, and the body is usually much more honest than carefully chosen words. It reacts without overthinking. It reveals where real interest naturally settles. That brings us to the seventh sign. This one is one of the clearest signals on the entire list, yet many people never notice it because it happens so quickly. The next time you touch him, even if it is something completely casual, pay close attention to what happens immediately afterward. Maybe your hand lightly brushes his arm. Maybe you briefly touch his shoulder while laughing. Watch the first second after that moment. Does he suddenly become still for an instant? Does his expression change ever so slightly, almost too quickly to describe? Does he become a little quieter than he was just a moment before? Does he glance toward the place where you touched him, or look back at you with a softer expression than usual? These reactions may seem small, but they often reveal something much deeper. When someone feels genuinely attracted to you, your touch reaches them differently than anyone else's. It is not simply physical contact anymore. It creates an emotional response that appears before they even realize it. No matter how calm they try to appear, there is often a tiny pause, a brief moment where their mind catches up with what they just felt. That reaction is difficult to fake because it happens naturally. Compare it with how he reacts when other people casually touch him. Does he respond the same way, or is there something noticeably different when it comes from you? If you have already seen that difference, then you have probably witnessed one of the most honest signs without realizing it. Stay with me, because the final sign quietly brings everything together and explains why all of these little moments matter so much. The eighth sign is not one single action. It is a pattern made up of many small choices that only make sense once you understand what is motivating them. He remembers something you mentioned weeks earlier, even though it seemed unimportant at the time, and unexpectedly brings it up again. He hears a song, notices a place, or comes across something that reminds him of you, and instead of keeping that thought to himself, he shares it with you. He suggests spending time together one-on-one, even when inviting a larger group would have been the easier and more natural option. Little by little, he creates shared memories that belong only to the two of you. He refers back to inside jokes, old conversations, or quiet moments that nobody else would understand because he has been paying close attention all along. What he is really doing is building a private connection, creating small spaces where the two of you share something unique. People rarely do that by accident. It is not simple politeness, and it is not an ordinary habit. It usually happens because someone feels a genuine pull toward another person and wants that connection to grow, even if they have not yet figured out how to express those feelings openly. That is why this final sign is so powerful. It gathers all the earlier signals into one clear picture. The closer you look, the harder it becomes to believe they were all random coincidences. What happens next may completely change the way you see these moments from now on. Now, here is what often keeps people stuck even after they recognize every one of these signs. They finally notice the pattern. They begin to believe that something real may actually be happening. Then they stop and wait. They wait for a clear confession. They wait for the perfect sentence that removes every possible doubt. While they are waiting, uncertainty quietly returns. They begin asking themselves whether they imagined everything. Maybe they misunderstood the signals. Maybe they need stronger proof before trusting what they already feel. Because of those doubts, they slowly become more reserved. They hold back a little. They try not to appear too interested or too available. From the other person's perspective, however, that change can easily look like fading interest. So they also become more cautious. They step back without making a scene. Little by little, the connection weakens before it ever has the chance to become something meaningful. Not because the feelings were missing, but because both people were waiting for certainty while ignoring everything that had already been quietly revealed. His actions had been speaking all along, every time he moved closer without needing to. Every time a small touch lasted just a little longer. Every time his eyes stayed on yours before he finally looked away. Every time he found another reason to delay saying goodbye. Every time his body naturally turned toward you. Every time your touch affected him differently than anyone else's. Every time he created a small moment that belonged only to the two of you. None of those moments were meaningless. You were never imagining them. You simply did not have the right way to understand them. Now you do. The next time you are together and your mind begins questioning everything, pause for a moment. Pay attention to what his body is naturally doing instead of focusing only on the words he has not spoken yet. Actions often reveal emotions long before conversations ever do. If the patterns you see match what you have learned today, allow yourself to trust what is unfolding in front of you. Real feelings do not always begin with perfect words.